This is a French painter by the name of Maurice Utrillo. He's well known for painting city scenes that look three-dimensional. Take a close look at the buildings in these pictures and see if you can figure out exactly what it is that makes it look like you could walk right into that picture. The farther away something is, the smaller it appears. And a big building has one side close to you and one side a lot farther away from you. Do you notice how one side of the building appears to be a lot shorter than the other? That's what makes it look like one of the sides is a lot farther away from you than the other side is. And that's a technique called perspective. The technique that Utrillo used in all of his paintings. Today we're going to use perspective, and we're going to see how it helps us make our city scene look three-dimensional instead of just flat. For this next picture, we're going to pretend that we're standing on a street of a big city. We're actually not standing on the street, though, because we're looking down on the tops of some skyscrapers. So we must be in a building that's a little bit taller than they are. Start by putting a vanishing point right up on top of your paper like I just did. It's just a little dot right up in the middle, right at the exact top. Okay. And then take your ruler, and you're going to need room for the sidewalk and the street or whatever else you decide to put down there. So give yourself a couple inches of space or 3 inches at the bottom, depending on how big your paper is, and draw your line exactly horizontal all the way across. Okay. Now you're going to decide where the top of them is going to be, and you need to give yourself plenty of room at the top too, between the edge of the paper and the top of the buildings, because you want to be able to have that three-dimensional effect and see the top of the buildings. So draw your line about here, give yourself about 2.5, 3 inches, something like that. Make an exactly horizontal line like that. Okay. Now, the skyscrapers or tall buildings, whatever you want to call them, they're not always the same width. Some of them are narrower than others, and I'm making some exactly vertical lines across to, divide up this space into several skyscrapers. And I'm not trying to get them all exactly the same because, like I said, they're not all exactly the same. Not in real life, they're not. Okay. Now, that's how much I have so far. Exactly vertical, exactly horizontal. Now this is the part you need to really watch. I take my ruler and I make sure that it's touching the vanishing point and touching the edge of the building over there, the edge of the paper. And I'm using my ruler to draw a line back toward it, but I'm not going to go all the way back, especially not with a crayon because I can't erase anything. That's why I recommend that you do it with a pencil. Okay, now I move it and I line it up so that it's got the vanishing point, and then it's got the first vertical line both on the same side of the ruler, and I draw another line following my ruler, and I try to get it about even with the first one that I drew. Alright, then I slide my ruler again. I still have to make sure that it's touching the vanishing point and on the same side touching the next vertical line, and draw my line back. And now I'm going to be coming at the dot from a different angle because I'm lining it up with vertical lines over here. So I'll make sure that the line and the dot are on the same side of the ruler when you draw your line back. Then I'm going to go to the edge of the paper here. That's going to be a really narrow building. Okay, now this is what I have. I think you can start to see the three-dimensional effect. Alright, now I'm going to make my ruler be exactly horizontal and have it connecting all of these lines. Now you can see that some of the ones that I have touch the ruler and some of them don't. But I'm trying to make my ruler or my line exactly parallel to the top of the paper when I draw my line. And then the lines that didn't quite go up to where I drew the line, I'm just going to complete the lines. Okay. Now you see I've got a couple of places where the lines are a little bit too long. It's a good thing they're not way too long because I can't erase. But if you have some that are sticking out, then you can erase. Now for this next part, you might want to look at some pictures of some city streets to see the different kinds of windows and things that they have. If you're doing a skyscraper, you're not going to have a window that big, okay? Or a door that big and a window that big. That would just really look silly. Think about how big those things would be if that skyscraper was 100 feet tall. No, they have a lot of windows and they're small compared to the overall size of the skyscraper. Architects use a lot of different, put a lot of different geometric shapes together when they design buildings. Different proportions of rectangles mostly. But sometimes they have some half circles and things like that. I'm trying to make my windows equal in size and trying to make them level also. Okay. And then I'm going to put my ruler down here so I can make the bottoms of the next row. And if I wanted to, I could go ahead and like use my ruler and measure so I can get everyone exactly the same width. I'm not really doing that. I'm just using my ruler for a straight edge. And I'm just kind of looking to see how wide they are. I'm not really measuring, but you could do that. And then I'm finishing them up this way, trying to get the sides exactly parallel to the sides of the building and so on. Now on the lower level of the tall building is where the shops usually are. And the shops usually have some big show windows. And the door's usually pretty big, a lot bigger than what we would have in our house. And this harmonizes with the windows because they're rectangle just like the windows are. And so I'm making the bottom of the building there right underneath the big windows. And eventually I can put things in the windows too. I'm not going to color everything yet. And there's a lot of extra details I'm going to add. Okay. And I'm going to add another row of windows. Usually there's offices or residences or sometimes storage in the upper parts of the buildings. If you look at the tall buildings, they have windows that are different sizes. Like they might have the smaller windows for like the residences, and then like for an office part or a big meeting room or something like that, they might have some really big like picture windows like the ones they put in the middle of this building. And this time I'm adding some arched windows and an arched door. Take a look at some pictures of some of these big buildings and you'll see a lot of little details that the architects put in. They don't do as much of that these days. The buildings are a lot more plain now. But we still have a lot of the older buildings in the cities. And this big arched window has a curved top like the door in this building. So it kind of unifies the design because it's repeated curves and things like that. Just like in the other buildings, repeated rectangles, geometric shapes. Alright, I'm going to move my ruler about 1 inch down from the bottoms of the buildings, and I'm going to draw a line parallel to the bottoms of the buildings, and that's going to be where the sidewalk ends. But I'm leaving room because beyond that I'm going to have the street or maybe a waterfront. And I'm making another line for the curb. And now what I'm going to do, I want to make my sidewalk really look three-dimensional. And so along the edge of the sidewalk line, I'm making a little dot every inch. I'm even looking on my ruler to do that. Okay, now I'm going to use those little dots, and I'm still going to use my vanishing point. I take my ruler and I'm going to line it up so that it touches one of those little dots and touches the vanishing point, same side of the ruler, and I'm going to draw a line just across the sidewalk. Now I'm going to scoot it over to the next dot on the sidewalk and draw another line. And all this time I have to make sure that it's still in contact with the vanishing point, and that the vanishing point and the dot are on the same side of the ruler. And you'll notice as you do this with every dot that the lines are going to change direction. And that's part of what makes it look three-dimensional. Okay? So don't let that throw you off, because sometimes people get thrown off. They think that it's wrong and that all of the lines need to go in the same direction, but they don't, not for this. So just make sure that the ruler is in contact with the vanishing point and one of the dots, and draw your line across the sidewalk, and you'll be really amazed at the effect. Sometimes buildings on a city street actually are sitting on a waterfront, especially in the bigger cities. And so you'd have some options. You wouldn't have to put a road out in front of the sidewalk. You could put some water, like a river or something, and you could put some boats. All that is going to be really interesting. And so think about what you might do. You don't have to stick with realistic colors in the buildings, but you do need to color them and the sidewalk and the sky. What you don't want to do is leave the windows blank white, because that's not how they would appear. Usually windows, if you're standing outside and you're looking in from the outside from a little bit of a distance, if there's not a light on in the window, they appear dark. So you'd use a dark blue or a black or a gray or something like that. If there's a light on in the window, then yellow is a good color to show that. You can even draw things in the windows, like in the store windows of the grocery store. I've got some baskets of fruit there. You can draw some little people in the windows. You could even draw some curtains showing. Those are all things that might be able to be seen. And they're all things that will add interest to your piece of work that you're doing. And don't forget to add some people on the sidewalk or some vehicles in the street. Or if your buildings are sitting on a waterfront, you'd probably want to put some boats in the water. All of that's going to make it more interesting too. Okay, I finished coloring it. Mine still looks pretty empty. I didn't put any boats in or any cars or any people. I'm kind of leaving that up to you to come up with ideas for that.